The following takes place between 9 a.m. and 10 a.m. Events occur in real time.
Good morning, everyone, especially all those fans out there in New England and anywhere out there that you're a Patriots fan. Good morning to you all, because the New England Patriots are at the top of the AFC and arguably you can consider the best team in the NFL, and maybe we'll talk about that today. But no, we are obviously coming off the heels of the end of Week 13, and of course the very wacky, very windy Monday Night Football matchup last night between the New England Patriots and the Buffalo Bills, which saw the high-powered passing attack from the Patriots outman the Buffalo Bills. No, obviously, we all know the jokes. Mac Jones attempted 3 passes, but the Patriots ran down the throats of the Bills and effectively put themselves in the driver's seat for not only the AFC East, but also the AFC's top seed. Because, John, I'm done with maybes. I'm done with let's see. I'm done with I need to see more. This Patriots team is elite, and they're elite defensively. And if there's a word higher than elite, I'd love to know, because I think they might be at that level at this point. And I think they have what is turning out to be a very disciplined, efficient, and unselfish offense. And that happens to be somewhat talented, pretty talented. I know Mac Jones is taking a lot of slack today, but that again is obviously the wrong conclusion, if that's the one you're coming to. That was a great win for the Patriots last night. Really a huge statement, and if anything, was just further emphasizes how great Bill Belichick is.
Yeah, there's no question that Belichick still remains the best coach in the NFL, and we've had this discussion before, Ian. Like, who's the second best coach? You could probably throw 10 names out there, and you could push back on all of them. He remains the best coach in the business by a large margin, and we saw it again last night. An interesting game where Mac Jones had more rushing attempts than passing attempts last night. He had the 2 quarterback sneaks and the 3 kneel downs, totaling 5 rushing attempts and only 3 passes, but it got the job done. The Patriots defense outstanding, in their running game, which has really stepped up the second half of this year, outstanding as well. And in those conditions, that's the right way to play. I mean, that was not an easy place to play. The wind was reaching 55 miles per hour. I don't care how strong your arm is, you're not going to be accurate throwing the football. And Patriots were able to run the football effectively and take care of business on defense. So, yeah, very impressive win. You were to the party before I was. A few weeks back, you were saying, I think this can be the best team in the AFC. And I kind of jumped on board a couple weeks ago. Last week, I had them as my number 1 team in the AFC. This week, I have them as my number 1 team in the AFC. And I think it's a collision course of Patriots-Kansas City AFC Championship game, which would be a blast.
Yeah, and look, I mean, I was a little cautious back then when I first brought it up, but the signs were starting to come together when it comes to, okay, how good is this Patriots team? And you mentioned how good the rushing attack. They did most of that without Damian Harris in the second half. I mean, he obviously was a little bit banged up. Now, when he was out there, he was obviously very effective, but even having that little wrinkle thrown in the second half, they committed to the game plan. And, I know we're seeing a lot of this, and I think this is a lazy, narrative-driven thought process, but there are people out there coming to the conclusion that this was a statement about Mac Jones. And I say, no, this is the furthest from the truth. This has nothing to do with whether or not the Patriots felt Mac Jones could do certain things. This was just the right game plan, because my question to those criticizing Mac Jones for only throwing 3 passes, what good did passing do the Buffalo Bills? Josh Allen, 50%, 145 yards, and the only touchdown was by virtue of a drive that started on the Patriots' 12-yard line. So, to me, forget about the score. The Patriots dominated this game. And for all those complaining about pass yards and all this, which ultimately netted them only 131 yards because they were sacked twice. What's the point? Why throw the ball? Like, why would you throw in this type of environment when we saw the Buffalo Bills attempt a field goal from a shorter distance than an extra point and
Mhm.
miss because that wind literally just took it a hard right. So, trying to throw the ball and look, give Josh Allen credit. I think a lot of people would agree that he probably has the strongest arm in the NFL. Correct?
Yeah, he's certainly in the
Yeah,
discussion. Yeah,
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 him 1, 2, or 3. So
yeah.
he
I
has
would, yeah.
yeah. So that was an advantage for him, and he still didn't play well yesterday because of the wind. So this idea that people are criticizing Mac Jones for only throwing 3 pass attempts, I'm praising him for sitting back and being an incredibly unselfish teammate and buying into this game plan that was maddening if you were a fan, but was if you're a football guy, if you're a football person, you love that
I
because
don't.
that was just a masterclass of coaching and a commitment to a game plan that worked.
I don't think he really had a choice. I don't think he's checking out of runs into passes. I think he's at that point in his
No, but
career.
no,
Well, I think he has
but Woody,
Wolfie.
I
mean,
don't honestly, I don't think he would. I think he's smarter. I don't like this is a kid who doesn't have an ego in the sense
well,
that he doesn't like all athletes have an ego. All great athletes have
right. He
egos.
just trademarked,
Yeah,
MJ10 and
my
Mac 10.
point
So
my
he's got
point
an
is
ego.
like
I mean,
his ego isn't going to get in the way of what the coaches want to do. Like he's not his ego isn't it doesn't mean, oh, I need to pass and not run. No, he needs to
no,
win.
no.
That's his ego. Like he wants to
Well,
win.
right. I mean,
So that's what I'm saying when he doesn't have an ego in that sense because you know how many quarterbacks could get frustrated and whatever for handing the ball off what at one point 32 straight times like I mean, it
yeah, I
was
mean,
yeah.
his first pass was a great catch by John Smith. So
Mhm.
that, probably said, hold on, this is not the night to throw the football. And it wasn't. It wasn't a night to throw the football. It was a night to run the football. And Patriots did that so well. And Buffalo is so averse to running the football. I mean, they were never out of the game.
I
It
don't
was
think they
never a
could have.
two-score lead. They
Yeah,
just
they
don't
just couldn't.
commit to it at
Yeah.
all. They just don't seem to really. I mean, Tennessee somehow did with backup running back. So, and actually, Buffalo's best running back is the quarterback. I mean, he's their best running back. He gets loose out of the pocket. He's a handful. But I mean, how many times can you run the quarterback? Especially if he's going to throw 30 passes. So yeah, it was an outstanding game plan, and I still think the key to the game, the defense. I mean, they just
Mhm.
came up with play after play after play. The receivers weren't generally open for Buffalo, and that's a talented receiving group, and they did a great job mixing up coverages, going to zone, and obviously confusing Josh Allen enough that he had a subprime night. Although he's so up and down that you don't know what you're going to get from week to week. And no, that was just an impressive win to win in Buffalo. It's going to be deflating for the Bills because I think they went into this year going, okay, after 20 years of being dominated, it's now our division. Well, here we are in early December. The Patriots have a 1.5 game lead and beat you last night. That's got to be demoralizing.
What was Sean McVay on the sidelines last night for the Buffalo Bills? I couldn't tell. I got really confused.
No, it's
and I
actually
was,
it's the opposite. He's the opposite of Sean McVay,
I-
in that Sean McVay gave so much praise to Bill Belichick.
well,
Sean McDermott doesn't even want to acknowledge him. It's like somewhere in the middle probably works. Like, understand the guy's a great coach, but don't be intimidated by him like Sean McVay was. But also don't be,
Well-
a dink like Sean McDermott is.
here's where I disagree slightly. I think on the surface, obviously McVay praised and McDermott whined, but the root of it all is the same problem. They were both intimidated by Bill Belichick, and it showed very early on that Sean McDermott was coaching. I don't want to say afraid, but he was coaching with I don't know, with angst. I don't know what it was, but
That's him. I mean, he
I
does
said
not
it.
set a tone of calmness. That's for sure. I mean,
No,
the guy
and
is wound way too tight, and that
look,
goes down to the rest of his team.
and we saw it, and I'm glad you just said that because we saw it from the moment that he started complaining about every little thing. I mean, he was complaining about
Right.
things that, like, I mean, if anyone had the right to complain, it was Belichick on that pass or that roughing or unnecessary roughness call that gave Buffalo basically a
That was
chance to hit that
ridiculous.
field goal.
Ridiculous
I
call.
mean,
That was a ridiculous
Yeah,
call.
it was a terrible call. Which again, we saw that kick afterwards. If they were 5 yards deeper, that kick probably goes wide because of how it was moving. So, it's So if anyone had the right to complain, it wasn't Sean McDermott. And then that challenge was one of the most idiotic things I've ever seen. We talked yesterday a lot about stupid coaching decisions, and
Mhm.
the flip side of dumb coaching decisions and right coaching decisions, not based on analytics but based on situation, was Bill Belichick going for it, going for the 2-point conversion, which ultimately
Yep.
played a huge role down the stretch. Um,
Absolutely. Yep.
Dumb coaching decisions is emotionally challenging. Like, let alone seeing Mac Jones hit the ground. I watched that replay 6, 7 times, and I still could not see him get from point A to where he somehow crawled out at the end. It was like an optical illusion. I was staring at it, and
Hmm.
all of a sudden it's like, wait a minute, Mac Jones is already here. So I'm like thinking to myself, like, who on that staff, whether it was a assistant coach, whether it was a personnel guy, said, "Hey, challenge this," or was it Sean McDermott just emotionally challenging a play that, guess what, played a huge role down the stretch because they ran out of timeouts.
Hmm.
And I'm sitting here thinking, like, this is a guy that gets widely praised as one of the up and coming new coaches. And this kind of speaks to what we talk about when it comes to coaching in the NFL, where Bill Belichick is just so much higher on a stratosphere higher than everyone else, and it's been like that for years. This isn't a new thing. I mean, he's just, I think, now really showing his coaching chops to the general public because Brady isn't there. Although,
Hmm.
again, if you were watching the Patriots as you and I have done, with a with the intent of actually analyzing them, then you'd realize that both those guys had a huge hand in what they accomplished
Of
in New
course.
England. But we're now
Right.
seeing Belichick and Brady to an extent show what they have away from each other, and I think it's pretty great. And that's why, as much as I go back and forth about would I like to see a Patriots Bucks Super Bowl? Absolutely. It will be an incredible test of my mental strength to get through those 2 weeks leading up to that game, and then just my ability to compartmentalize during the actual game itself, when rooting for the Patriots, but somehow also rooting for Brady not to suck, but to lose. So um, it's it's incredible. If you're a Patriots fan, you got to be excited right now. They look like the best team in the AFC. I know your buddy Nick Wright is really really cherry picking the info that he wants to make it seem like the Chiefs are the best team in the AFC. But the reality of it is the Chiefs are 2-5 in the conference. They've played, again. I'm not going to criticize who their opponents are, but based on their
They're,
early.
they're not two. They're not 2-5 in the conference. They're 8-4 overall. So that's
No,
what you
I'm
pointed out.
sorry, 2-4. They're 2-4 in the conference. I apologize.
I think they're. I thought they were because I know they
No, they
swept.
have at least 4 losses in the conference. That's one of their
Right. Yeah, that's one of the
really
problems.
big
The Patriots would win
hurdles.
the
Yeah.
tiebreaker. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah. That
pretty
was.
much every AFC team would win the tiebreaker over them,
Yeah.
which is
Kansas
kind of
City
a
has to
hurdle.
be. Kansas City has to beat everybody by a game to be
Mhm.
the one seed. Like you
And
said, they lose all the
and
tiebreakers. But
The
yeah, they're.
Patriots are 7-1 in the AFC.
Yep.
Their only
Yep.
loss is the Damian Harris fumble at the end of the Miami game in week 1. That's the only time they've lost against the conference. So, again, in hindsight, we're going to look back and say, well, it was obvious this team was really great, but it took a little while to really blossom into this. Oh my God, this team is not just a potential playoff, you know, headache for some team. This is a team that might get a lot of Super Bowl picks when playoff selections come in. In the middle of January when the playoffs get going. So
The only two teams I could see going to the Super Bowl from the AFC, the Patriots and the Chiefs. I can't
yeah,
see any other team right now in the AFC. I was doing my power rankings this morning. It was Patriots, Chiefs, and I'm like, okay, like who's the third best team in the AFC? It's not Baltimore. They can't get out of
no,
their own way. They can't score points. They turn the ball over. They got a million injuries. Like the rest of that division, Cincinnati looks good one week and then they get blown out by the Chargers the next week, and Cleveland's a hot mess.
it's
And
probably Indianapolis, right? But even then,
they're playing the best of all those teams, right?
yeah.
They really are. I mean, I think they've won 6 out of 8, and their losses have been in overtime to Baltimore, and they play the Buccaneers really tough
Mhm.
a couple weeks ago. That was a hell of a game. That again, if Carson Wentz isn't Carson Wentz and has that stupid turnover, maybe they win that game. But they're impressive. They play good defense. They can run the ball. I think they're pretty well coached. Frank Reich's a good coach, and that's going to be an excellent game in 2 weeks. Patriots at Indianapolis on a Saturday night. That's going to be another, interesting game to watch because that's a team that you may have to see again in the postseason. But yeah, the third best team in the AFC. Good luck. I think it's a collision course of Patriots and Chiefs in the AFC, and again, that'd be real interesting to see.
Yeah, no, and like, look, and if you're going to ask me, I mean, I think it's pretty obvious who the edge goes to. It's the Patriots. You know, like the Chiefs defense has been really good. The Patriots defense has been better. The Chiefs offense, the Chiefs offense is underperforming. I think the Patriots offense is right where we expect, and I think there's a difference. So, you know how it's like you can have two teams with the same record but two totally different,
Oh, sure. Yeah.
trajectories. Like you can look at two teams and be like, this team is bad, this team is great, same exact record. Well, obviously
Mhm.
you have to take the context into it, and I think that's what we're doing. I think the Patriots offense is elite. I don't think they do anything. I mean, running the ball, they're probably, if not the best or one of the best teams in the league running the ball. But I don't think they do anything like elite. Like the Buccaneers passing attack is as elite as you're gonna get. The
Right.
Patriots obviously don't have that, but I think they're so well balanced across the board, and I think they have a great collection of talent. It doesn't mean that they have great talent, just a great collection of the right guys. Like I know people again, like criticizing N'Keal Harry. I'm going to cut him a little bit of slack with that play yesterday. That was really funky, just how the ball was moving, it landed, and then it just
Yeah.
it,
Just get out of the way
yeah,
of it,
just
though.
get
That's
out of the
like
way,
pretty
like
simple. Yeah.
but that's the thing. It's like people will see that, and that's all they talk about. Well, I remember him, you know, executing a key block right before that on that Damian Harris run. He
Well,
was
that's good because
also,
that's
yeah.
pretty much all he can do. He can't catch, he can't
Well,
run
hey,
routes, and
hey, you know
he should
what?
not be returning punts. No, let's not cut him any slack. Because if they lost that
No,
game last night, we
I'm,
could have laid the blame right on him for being in the wrong place at the wrong time with his head.
but
Did he think he was playing for the
look,
revolution?
yeah, look, I'm not trying to like elevate N'Keal Harry over what he is, but to criticize him for that, and but ignore the value he does bring in this like you don't do what you do last night without N'Keal Harry. You don't do what you do without several players, but he was a big factor in that. And look, the Patriots receivers as a group are probably the best and most committed at blocking, and that says quite a bit of obviously about coaching, but it also adds value to players that again.
You've watched Green Bay play this year. You see their receivers block; they're outstanding at it too.
Yeah,
I
oh
mean,
yeah.
and
Well, I mean,
their receivers are huge. They've
and
got
it's
the
not
biggest collection of receivers.
and it's not a
Yeah,
coincidence that those two teams might be right now the two most balanced and best teams in the league.
I got you on my side. Thank God for one.
Look,
That's what I want, the Super Bowl, brother. I got you now. I'm hoping.
You've been, for months, you've just been trying to squeeze that
Months?
out. No,
Months? Years.
yeah.
I've been since about
Look,
2007. I'm like, Patriots, Packers. And isn't it odd that the Patriots and Packers have been, the Patriots have obviously been the best team in the AFC for over 20 years. I think you can make a case the Packers for the last
they've been the
20
most,
years have been
yeah, they've been the most consistent.
consistently, they just can't quite break through. But
Yeah.
they were always there. It's like they haven't met in the Super Bowl. It's like, that's a shame.
Yeah, and look, I mean, there's some, again, there's been opportunities. There's been several
Oh, yeah.
opportunities. We're not going to
Oh, yeah.
rehash that.
I know.
Like as much as I'd like,
2014, 2016.
hey, as much as I'd like to bring you down a notch after praising your guy or your team a little bit, I'll leave it at that, and just I'll point out that last night we got a great Joe Buck burn. Speaking of Seattle.
Oh man,
that was great, by the way, because Peyton obviously asked Joe Buck like if they'd ever want guests on during blowouts, and he's like, you know what? As a matter of fact, the last time we had a game like that was when you played Seattle in the Super Bowl, and I loved it. I thought that was great, and obviously Peyton, he's a good sport. He's certainly
he started laughing. Yeah,
self-deprecating humor is certainly something he enjoys. But no, look, the reality of it is the Chiefs, the Patriots. Right now really do look like the best teams in the conference. And, I can make an argument that the Patriots aren't any lower than third best team in the league.
Yeah, I think the NFC to me still appears better. And again, if we're, going to power rank teams, we can admit that Tampa and Green Bay have the better quarterback than the Patriots. Now,
obviously.
we're
Yeah.
also in agreement too that the Patriots have the better coach and the better defense. So that that can change things. So yeah, I think they're right there. Absolutely, they're right there.
Well, look, I mean, and I tell you this off air a lot. Like the fun thing about being a Brady fan and not a fan of the necessarily a fan of the team he's on is that I can kind of root just for him and not worry about the defense, which is just a headache for Bucks fans, or the rushing attack, which outside of that Leonard Fournette game a couple weeks ago is one of the worst in the league. It's bottom third in pretty much every rushing metric. So the Bucks are so reliant on, and we talked about this yesterday a lot. They are so reliant on the arm of Tom Brady, which does great things for his MVP case. Because I think I think he's pretty comfortably in the lead right now. With just a handful of weeks remaining, I think it's pretty safe that he's going to end up locking this up. But when it comes to balance, they're not the most balanced team. I mean, again,
No.
passing attack. I mean, you're going to get the passing is more important in this league than rushing. It's just obviously last night notwithstanding. So you're going to obviously still be a great offense, even if you are one dimensional like the Bucks are, and especially if you're one dimensional with the arm of Tom Brady, because as we pointed out yesterday, he's the only player in the history of this league. Not a joke. The only player in the history in this league that has any sort of consistent success throwing 40 plus times or 50 plus times. It's quite absurd.
Times. I think that's really the craziest stat I've ever.
And even 40 plus, I think his winning percentage is somewhere in the mid 600s, where the next closest guy is below 500. Now you got some.
That's insane.
Yeah, and you got some guys, some of the younger quarterbacks that have winning records, but you're talking about 3 or 4 games. So, you don't necessarily count that in the grand scheme of things. Brady again, that's another thing where he's just so far above and really just speaks to how good he is with the football and everything like that. I know the big thing now to try to bring down his MVP case is volume passer, which I'm sitting here thinking like, well, think about it. If he throws more than any other quarterback in the league, he has more everything. His offense is the best in the league. Wouldn't that inherently say that he is the most valuable player? Just by virtue of the volume of his pass attempts. And it's not like he's just throwing volume and not producing. Like, he's producing relative to the volume that he's throwing. So, like, again, that right there tells you, just based on that, he has the most valuable arm in the NFL. So again, MVP, pretty straightforward for them. But at the end of the day, if you're going to ask me right now, currently as they are, not projecting if the Bucks are going to get healthier or whatever, and that's something we can do down the road. But say the Bucks and the Patriots end up meeting the Super Bowl, probably take the Patriots.
I mean that would be interesting. I mean, I may have to still lean with Brady because it's a rematch, and it would, man, if we thought it was incredible in week 4, think about a Super Bowl with Brady and Belichick. Most of the country would be nauseous at that point.
Well, and you bring up the rematch, and that's the interesting thing, because we say, well, Brady's get the rematch, and you're like, wait a minute. Now Belichick gets the rematch too. So who's rematching is stronger, But, I think in very few, like, honestly, I think that's the only team that can beat the Bucks in the Super Bowl, like, right now, like, based on everything we've seen through 12 or 13 weeks. That's what I'm basing it on. Like, if the Bucks get Antonio Brown back, and if this, that, and the other happens, things could change. Obviously, the Patriots could regress a little bit over the next few weeks. I don't think that's going to happen, but you know what I mean. Right now, I think the Patriots are the only team that's going to, especially from the AFC, that's going to beat the Bucks in a potential Super Bowl. Just because, and again, a lot of that has to do with obviously the talent, but mostly because of Belichick. I mean, that's just the great advantage the Patriots have right now, and really a great complementary coaching staff. I know they don't. Josh McDaniels is a lightning rod for criticism, and I get it sometimes. Like, but as the day went on yesterday, it's like those criticism was kind of like, and this is what was going through my head, John, and this kind of allows you to kind of get into my brain a little bit. I was visual.
That's scary.
Yeah, it could be. It could be potentially. Um, I was watching Patriots fans essentially be Kramer at the racetrack. You know, when he's watching just the horses are in last. He's sitting there ripping his hair out. Then all of a sudden, starts making the run, and Kramer's getting excited, and he starts like
Yep.
pretending like he's on the. That's what people were doing when it comes to watching the Patriots run the ball. At first, it was like throw the ball, throw the ball. And then it was like, well, I mean, it's working. Keep going. You know, hey, whatever. You know,
Yeah.
this is kind of fun. And then at the end of the day, you're like, well, okay, well, the Bills threw the ball, and it just didn't work. And you're talking about one of the quarterbacks with the strongest arm. So if any quarterback would have been able to overcome some of this wind, it's a guy who can throw the ball really hard. And Josh Allen couldn't do it. So
Mhm.
again, what do you expect? This isn't a knock on Mac. This isn't a knock on his abilities, because that's the thing. It's like watching last night does not negate what we've seen for 12 weeks prior. You know what I mean? Like that's what people were
Mhm.
doing. They were like, "Oh, we're going to take everything we saw in this game in a situation that was so unique that it hasn't really happened in that often to sit there and be like, "Oh yeah, no, he obviously cannot handle it." You know, there's no way that he can handle throwing the ball. Well, it's 50-mile-an-hour winds. Let's pump the brakes on that overreaction a little bit.
Yeah, let's not have a big turnover. And I think that was the
That
part
was
of
the
that. And
that was the key of the game. Yeah,
you're exactly.
if
Yep.
if if you had the whiteboard up, and if you walk into the Patriots locker room and you're looking at the number one key, don't turn the ball over. Control the clock. You do that, you win. And that's exactly what they
Yep.
did. They took the
And
ball
your
out. Yeah, they took the ball
and your
out of.
field goal kickers,
Yep,
your kicker's better than theirs
yep.
too. And that was a huge thing because if Buffalo makes that field goal, now we've got a different
Well,
dynamic heading down the stretch. So that was big.
think about the thought process and making sure that the Patriots had the wind in the fourth quarter, and how big
Right.
of a
That was
role that
huge.
played.
Yep.
And just how
Absolutely.
that game was just, it was very clear that the Patriots, like I texted you during the first quarter, they are just getting through this first quarter.
Yep.
They had no intention of trying, like that's the thing. It's like whether or not Mac could complete it is not the issue. I think they looked at it and said, well, if we throw the ball, we are creating potential problems. And it's
Yep.
not because of Mac, because there's just so many unpredictable factors when throwing the ball in this type of wind. Like, you know what I mean? All it has to do is be off by just an inch or a foot, and it causes a problem. So if I'm Bill Belichick, I'm looking at this and saying, well, how do we prevent turning the ball over? Well, we don't put it in a vulnerable position, and that is
Mhm.
putting the ball in the air when the air is whipping around. Because at the end of the day, it's just unpredictable, and unpredictability can lead to catastrophe in football games like this. So, you know what Bill Belichick did? He took the unpredictability away from it. He said, okay, we're going to rely on our defense. We're going to run the ball, control the clock, and not turn the ball over. Now, again, the special teams almost ruined that. But if you take away that play and that scenario, that situation, the Patriots dominated this game from the moment it started to the very end. They just, in the face of 8 and 9 people in the box. This is the most incredible thing about this. Not only did the Bills know that they were going to run, they called plays to stop the run. There
Mhm.
was no one past 5 yards beyond the line of scrimmage for them. They had one safety, maybe. Everyone else was just up front, ready to stop the run, and they just couldn't do it. And the Patriots, again, patience, 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 and just stuck with it. And it was great. It was great.
They also went with 6 offensive linemen
Yeah.
on 60% of the plays, which I thought was a really smart move. I'm always a big fan of 6 offensive linemen because, if you're going to run the ball, then why not have an extra offensive lineman in there rather than a tight end who can't block? And then they obviously run a lot of two back sets with fullback, which again gives you an extra blocker in there. So they were able to, do what they had to do in the run game.
Mhm.
And again, even if that's just the type of game where if you're not scoring, because we knew that was not going to be a high scoring game, and the total was 41. Like I'm assuming Vegas got croaked last night, or local bookmakers got broke last night because who in their right mind would bet over in that game with
Yeah.
those conditions? But a good drive is still 2 first downs and a decent punt. That's looked at as a good drive. It doesn't have to end in points. I mean, you can just play that field position and hope for a turnover or a bad punt. And we knew when you were punting into the wind that was just a crapshoot. So yeah, that's the type of game you have to play in that situation. And again, Buffalo just Sean McDermott, not realize what the wind and the rain and the snow and all of that stuff was all about. I mean, he lives in Buffalo. That's like an average day in Buffalo. And he still came out and threw 30 passes, only ran the ball 25 times. And again, they were never out of it by two scores. It was always a fairly close game on the scoreboard.
Yeah, and again, I do think the score was a little deceiving because I do think the Patriots dominated for the bulk of this game because I never really felt the Buffalo kind of got some things going there towards the end, like moving the ball. Um, one of the drives was I mean incredible, just an incredible catch by Stephon Diggs. I was shocked that he got both his feet down on that one.
Yeah, that was a nice catch.
That was
Yeah.
impressive. But really, I mean, at no point during that game, like it was nerve wracking. But like I never felt like the Patriots ever lost control of that game. You know what I mean? Like it wasn't that victory was certain. It just felt that this was one of those like the Patriots are just going to end up holding on to this. They've just done everything right. They've prepared properly, and again, you could see that Sean McDermott. I almost called him Sean McVay. A little Freudian slip, I guess maybe. But yeah, you could see that he just wasn't up to par when it came to the coaching, and there was several situations, including the decision not to take the wind in the second half or
Mhm.
in the second and fourth quarter. Um, Obviously, the like you said, the decision to throw almost twice as much as you ran the ball, and obviously the in game decisions like taking that very dumb challenge. I mean, it was. I'm sitting here scratching my head. I'm like, what are you thinking? You're just giving away a timeout in the second half, mind you, not the first half. Like I can see, okay, maybe you're getting towards the end of the first half. You're not going to use them anyways. Might as well, whatever. You wasted timeout. Granted, now you do risk losing a challenge if you lose that, but still, you're going to have all your timeout. This was the second half. This was a waste of a challenge. It was a waste of a timeout, and it hurt them in the end. Now, would one more timeout would have changed things, at the very end? No, but they would have at least got the ball back because the Patriots wouldn't
Mhm.
have been able to run out the clock like they did. So,
Right. Yeah. No. No. I mean, he's obviously, I think, way too intense. Which just again trickles down to the rest of the team, and then you get Josh Allen, who is almost like an Irish setter out there. He's just all hopped up and hyped up, and sometimes out of control and forgets what he needs to do. I mean, he runs into more sacks than any quarterback
mhm,
I think I've seen. He turns his back to the play. They had the ball inside the 10, right? It was second down at the 6, and
mhm.
the last thing you can do is take a sack. That was the play where it felt like he was sacked twice,
And they
right?
missed.
Went down,
I'm
got up,
pretty sure they
got
missed that
sacked
field
again.
goal, right? Was that the drive
Yeah,
they missed the field
yeah,
goal? Yeah.
yeah. So I mean, he does those things again. Situational football is heightened in that situation. I mean, if you're in a dome and both teams are going up and down the field, well, okay, you took a sack, you kick a field goal, you live to play another day. But in a situation like that, like every
Mhm,
play was scrutinized and hyper sensitive and important that something like that flips the game, and
mhm.
that's what it came down to. Just those little things that Buffalo wasn't up to par, and the Patriots were. And again, that's coaching,
Yep.
and the Patriots have the best coach in the business, no question about it.
That's why it couldn't have worked out any better. That Sunday we saw some of the worst coaching decisions I've ever seen collectively on one day, and then Belichick came back and totally redeemed the NFL coaches with just a master class and making the right decisions. Like almost again, it was almost like he was listening to this show yesterday and my complaints about the
He
stupid.
was,
Well, the
of course, he
going
was.
for it, giving up points, like we talked about. We talked about Denver twice giving up field goals to try to go for it. Well,
Right?
we saw,
Yeah.
and I'll end it here on this because we do got to go. But Belichick made two decisions that were 100% the right decision and exactly the kind of decisions I was talking about yesterday. I've already mentioned going for the 2-point conversion
Yep.
in that situation. We saw later that again the Bills try to attempt essentially a extra point, which is what the Patriots would have had to do in that situation, and that
Hmm.
ball take a hard right and go wide. So great
Hmm.
decision there. And then on the flip side, took the field goal in the opposite direction trusted his feel in a situation where people were like, just go for it. It's 4 down territory. No, he valued the points because the points mattered so much more in this game than they do in, like you said, games like
Mhm.
domes where it's like, okay, maybe, maybe, yeah, maybe like you said, you can just come back and get it. That was it. That was the game right there. And again, that kind of speaks to not analytics don't tell you everything. It's about situations. Every situation
Mhm.
is different, and we saw that two different, very different situations with two different results and two different decisions in the same exact game, about 10 minutes apart.
Exactly. Yep.
So that's
Yep.
how dynamic football is. That's why stats and numbers and all these different things that come out every week can't tell you exactly what's going on, and that's why you living and dying by analytics, especially when it comes to making decisions on 4th down, is just silly and a little bit idiotic,
It's a
in my
it's a
opinion.
it's a three-dimensional game, and oftentimes
Mhm.
analytics is only two-dimensional,
Yep,
right?
exactly.
So that's where you have to factor that type of stuff in. Yeah, points were at a premium last night. It was like a pitcher's duel.
Yeah,
If you get to the top of the ninth and it's 0-0 and you got a guy on second with no outs, analytics says don't sacrifice him over to third, but we're watching the game. There aren't going to be a lot of runs here. The
yeah,
pitchers are dominating. The wind's blowing in. You're playing in San Francisco where you can't hit the ball anyway. So let's sacrifice the guy over to third and get him in on a squeeze play, a sacrifice play, whatever, wild pitch, whatever the case may be. It's different. If it's a 7-7 game and balls are flying out of the ballpark and you're playing in Colorado, different game. Same thing in football. I mean,
yeah,
that was a game. Who in their right mind thought that game was going to ever get more than 14-10? I mean, that's pretty much what we expected. And yeah, that's again what Belichick does better than any coach that I've really ever seen. And again, I always there's a holy trinity of head coaches in the history of the sport for me. There's him, Paul Brown, and Vince Lombardi. I never saw those. Well, I did see Paul Brown at the end of his career coach. Those are the three most important coaches in the best coaches. What he does better than his contemporaries and even the great coaches of even 30, 40 years ago, it's situational football is
hmm
just splendid. And that's so important. It's not sexy, right? It's not like, groundbreaking, but in that situation, that's what you do. And I think Brady's carried that with him to Tampa, and he's trying to teach
hmm
that, bunch of morons over there that he's trying to carry how to do that.
yeah. Well,
Seriously, I mean,
yeah,
he's
no,
got
I
to coach
agree.
a lot
Look,
of stupidity out
hey,
of those guys. Really, I mean, he's also the coach as far as
yeah.
I know. I mean,
Hey,
yeah,
look,
and GM. What the hell? Why not?
this has been a very good day because we've agreed on quite a bit, and I feel like we're gonna end it now just so we can end on such a high note that I don't think
Yes,
we'll ever
yes.
reach this level
Well,
again, because I think only from here on out it's gonna get a little bit more
it's like
intense. So
when George left the room after
yeah,
the
hey,
joke.
I'm out. That's it.
I'm out. I'm
Done
out.
for me. I'm going
That's
home,
it.
and that's what
Mic
we're gonna
drop.
do. We're gonna go home. Actually, we're already both home, but
Yeah.
we're gonna say goodbye to you guys, and we'll be back tomorrow. We're gonna really start to start shifting towards week 14, and look, the playoff picture's heating up, and we got some great races coming up. So have a great day, folks. Give us a follow on Twitter at FPC Radio Live, and we'll talk to you soon.